Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Kingdom of Dreams podcast. I'm your host, Jawad Mir. Today, my guest is Tom Spina. He's the founder of Regal Robot. Regal Robot creates pop culture themed art, replicas, and a whole lot more. And today, Tom and I specifically discussed Star Wars, but mainly Indiana Jones and the products that they have worked on over the years and that they have worked on in the recent years and what's coming up next. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Tom Spina. Just want to make a disclaimer to the audience that this is not a paid video in any way, or it's just my interest in what you guys do. I'm more of an Indiana Jones fan than Star Wars.
Totally fine. Yeah.
More so has to do with the fact that I'm a Spielberg fan.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
obviously, I've seen Star Wars, the original trilogy, the '90s one, and the new one.
Hmm.
Before we get started, obviously, I went through your website, Regal Robot, and went through some of the products. And I
Hmm.
think the thing that really attracted me was there was two things: the director's chair, because I'm a director myself, was
There you
kind of
go.
cool. But the Holy Grail, which was very special, I remember when I saw Indiana Jones Last Crusade. That's been my
Yeah.
favorite film of the entire series to
Oh
date.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
It's
Holy
funny.
Grail.
I don't know why that film gets like I know a lot of people who kind of poo-poo that one a little bit, and I don't get it. I love that film. That's absolutely like it's Raiders to me is still my favorite of the bunch, but boy, Last Crusade is like right behind it.
Yeah, I think what does it with is the father-son relationship, especially
Oh
being
yeah.
played by Sean Connery, and there's a humor, there's all that stuff in there, which really makes it interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen Indiana Jones Last Crusade so many times, but mostly from the part when, you see Henry Jones being trying to be rescued by Indiana Jones, mostly from that point because the humor and the chemistry between them is just
Uh-huh.
astoundingly amazing. Um, but
So
yeah,
so
so
like just right in with the vase
yes,
and then on from
that
there.
that's
Gotcha.
it. That's it.
There's your jumping off point.
So enough about me, which was not
Uh-huh.
the
Uh-huh.
case about this podcast, but more so about you. Tell me how you got started with, what was the catalyst behind Regal Robot, the journey, and when
I
did it
mean, yeah, for me, it's the other company that we have operating out of the same shop is Tom Spina Designs, and over there we're doing a lot of sculpture work. We do creature work, like the stuff behind us, which we did for commercials and things like that. We do bronze busts and wax figures, but the thing we're really known for is restoring original props. And doing like costume displays and stuff like that. All stuff that was used in the movie. Getting becoming basically over the years just like this trusted source for people who had priceless one of a kind things that they couldn't just send to anyone to work on, and like this is stuff you can't even send to like a typical art conservator. You need someone that has the sensibility of an art conservator and maybe uses some of those materials and at least that mindset of conservation safe materials and things like that, but you still have to have that uh, artistic approach of an effects person to restore some of these old creatures and monsters that were used in films. And then when it came to doing like custom mannequins and stuff like that, we would see a lot of stuff in museums that were nice and sure they were archival, but they didn't have the life that we wanted to see in them. So developing that over the years got us this great relationship with all kinds of collectors that were everywhere, from people who just liked replicas and toys to people that were collecting, screen use stuff from Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Ghostbusters, oh gosh, Terminator, Gremlins, all of these amazing films. If anybody happens to like films and watches your podcast, I suspect there might be a few. They can go to tomspinadesigns.com, search your favorite movie, and it's almost guaranteed we've done something from those movies. Um, but we started to then help people flesh out their man caves and their displays and things like that. Um, and that led us into doing some themed furniture, which ultimately led to the Han Solo and Carbonite desk, which we did in the mid sort of, I guess this is probably like 2008, 2009. Um, and that's the spark of Regal Robot. Um, as much as ultimately we got to do these great replicas and going into props and creatures and busts and all of the stuff that I absolutely love to do. The way in was this unique look at decorating. Our sense of like, how do we take this stuff that we love and bring it into people's lives in new ways? And that is something that gave us, honestly, something that Disney was willing to look at and talk about. We'd worked with Lucasfilm at that point for many years. We had done restoration for their archives at Skywalker Ranch. We had done tour suits for Chewbacca's. We've made creatures for commercials with them, on down the line. All of this stuff we had done. So we had the in on that side, but it was like we had to convince Disney that there was like a niche where we could fit in that wouldn't disrupt other licensees, and find a way to make something that was uniquely us and that would speak to collectors in a new way and give them something new to look at and bring into their homes.
I think I bet it's probably more challenging to go through all the legalities and the licenses than to actually work on the actual, the replicas or products or yeah, is that a fair statement to make?
That's a safe bet. Yeah, I would say this. Uh, they're different challenges. I would say one of them is a more enjoyable challenge,
Yeah, true,
but
true.
but they are very different. Doing things the way we do them, especially in terms of the way we develop product and the stuff we want to do and how far we want to take this stuff and not just, you know, slap a label on something or to, you know, we want to make sure that every product that we do, it's weird to even use the word product because like a lot of the stuff we make is so limited and it's hand done and hand painted, hand finished. You know, when we develop something, it's like it's always got to be: is this us? Does this feel right for our vibe, for lack of a better word? And there are a lot of challenges that come with that, and there's a lot of challenges that come with trying to um, trying to just meet the standards that we have and also that Lucasfilm and Disney have. Lucasfilm works with us on the product development side of things. Disney handles the licensing, and we've got a phenomenal partner at Lucasfilm, both as a company, but even just in the individuals that work with us when we're developing new product that are always, pushing us in the same. It's it's funny. It's rare that we come across other people that are like our people. And I feel like, especially with our main partner at Lucasfilm, we've got that. We've got someone that, when we have our weekly and we're bouncing around ideas, it's like, yes, we're all on the same page. This is great.
So cool, man. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing all that information. Um, Going kind of back to what I was asking you earlier, you kind of gave me a second part to that question, but essentially the first part, what got you into this? What was the
Oh,
catalyst behind
so
all this?
like even before,
Yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah. The very beginning.
man, I don't remember a time where I wasn't making stuff. Um, and I don't come from a particularly artistic family or anything like that. In fact, very practical family. My father was um, he was creative in his own way. He was creative in a mechanical way. Uh, People often use, and his father was before him. People often use our last name as like a verb. It's like, oh, someone Spina'd that, and it usually means someone like figured out a way to fix a fence using a bunch of zip ties and some stuff they had laying around the garage. That's the way that my father was creative. It was, if something was broken, he found a way to fix it, and so I definitely internalized that, but I just always had this artistic thing where I wanted to create stuff. I wanted to make monsters. I wanted to make masks. I loved making costumes early on. Halloween was and is very important. And so, I mean, that's the spark of it in terms of actually getting, sort of into the business and all of that. probably a longer story, but I can go as far into it as you like.
Got it. No, that's awesome. Just to share one little part about that business. Like, obviously, when you made the decision to do this, um, it's always, I mean, the challenge is always there, not only getting your first client, but to constantly building on and making sure you don't lose that
Yeah.
client or license. The very first one that you got, who was it, and what was the very first
Ooh.
product that you made?
So, if we're talking, uh, if it's Regal Robot, boy, that's a good question. So we um, we started working on the whole concept for Regal Robot and stuff in the mid so sort of around 2015 ish was when the notion came about. Probably even a tiny bit earlier. We then worked on it for from 2016 was when we knew it was happening, mid 2016, and it was mid 2017 that we debuted to the public, and we
Hmm.
debuted at Star Wars Celebration.
Ah,
Um, unfortunately, I don't have at the tip of my fingers who the first person to buy from our booth was,
that's
but
fun.
we had a ton of people come through the booth, and so it's hard to say who like the real first client was. We did do some great custom work for a fellow down in Tennessee, who I don't know. He's not super public, so I won't name a name, but
That's fine. That's fine.
what we did for him was and this was after Regal was somewhat established. Maybe this is a year or so in that we started on
Sure,
this work. Um, and he wanted to do a cantina theming for his man cave space where he had his collection and his home theater and stuff like that. So we wound up custom building him some cantina tables, some cantina chairs, and a sofa sized chair. We did a section of the bar for him to use behind the table, almost like a console table. Sorry, behind the couch.
sure,
And then we also did some cool stuff for the wall, some big wall decor pieces, the Docking Bay 94 symbol, Snaggletooth's belt buckle from the action figure as a symbol, which technically is a holiday special replica. Don't tell Disney that, but it's off the action figure, so we're covered. And then what else? We made the sign that goes over the door in the cantina, the SPGA looking sign, which nobody ever even knew what that was. We actually wound up finding that in a picture that Roger Christian, the art director, had. Technically, he was a set decorator, not art director on the first film, but he had this one picture where it showed just enough of it. It wasn't lit, but we finally figured out what the letters looked like, and that's the kind of stuff that you talk about the challenges but the good kind. We had looked at that sign for a decade. Me and like Pablo Hidalgo at Lucasfilm, we would do these panels at Star Wars Celebration talking about the cantina, going into all this detail, and we would always talk about how we knew what the first half of the sign over the door was but not the rest of it. And the day Roger dug up that picture, it was just like, oh my gosh, there's the rest of the sign. It's it's amazing to me that 40 plus years on, nearly 50 years since they started making the first film, right? We are still discovering stuff. We're still finding things out. I just actually got a batch of photos from an auction a few weeks back, and we discovered new things there. And it's just like, how wonderful is it that you have a film that inspired you as a kid, that gave you your livelihood as an adult, and still gives back to you as a hobby just these great tidbits of information that can just spark so much joy every time you see just something new in the background of a photo. I love it.
that's awesome. You remind me of this conversation that I had. I'm just trying to remember his name. He he was he's sort of involved in all these books with the Ralph McQuarrie, The Art of Ralph
Oh
McQuarrie,
yeah, as
the one who did.
Paul Bateman maybe.
No, no, no. Oh man, I've spoken to him so many times, and I've just lost my train of thought here. Um, Look it up, but it even like that to me was like I was going through the book on Amazon, like just they have like sample pages. I didn't order it or anything, but just to see how much there is, and then there's all these Star Wars novels, like
Then there's the making of. Now there's all these
Yeah.
Star Wars spin. Like it's a crazy. I mean, if you ask me now, I think they're now just standardizing with all the series, but it is what it
Right.
is. But it's just amazing that how much there is, and I think people are more fascinated with the older stuff probably more than newer, just because it relates to their childhood and everything, and
Oh yeah.
growing up. So it's cool. It's really really cool. I gotta find out the name, and I feel so terrible because I've spoken to this person 3 times, um, and he also worked on some dual book with Spielberg.
Oh
His
wow.
name, holy moly, I gotta look.
Get on Amazon, find it.
No, I have to find it. He's not really an author. I would say he's more of like a publisher.
Hmm.
Um, but I'll find that out. But going back to your products,
Yeah.
what is the process of take any product, whether it's Indiana Jones or Star Wars, you can
Yeah.
pick
Yeah.
any example. What's the process of actually getting it made from start to finish? I'm not talking about the legalities of the paperwork.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
talking
No,
about
the
when it's
fun
get
stuff is what you want
yeah,
to
the
know.
fun stuff. Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's funny too. The same thing I was just saying about finding old photos and stuff totally applies with Raiders and Temple of Doom and Last Crusade especially. And I think another reason that the newer films don't have as much of that. You mentioned the nostalgia side of it, huge part of
Hmm.
it, absolutely. But modern films, for Lucasfilm especially, were covered in a different way. Um, you go back to Star Wars, and in Lucasfilm's image archives, there's a certain number of pictures. Um, but then you start talking to, like, Phil Tippett or Doug Beswick or some of these crew
Hmm.
members who had their own personal cameras and just took cool pictures. And all of a sudden, you're learning things that you never knew before because they took pictures
Yeah,
of stuff that the on-set photographer didn't snap. Um, Whereas by the time you get to the 90s and early 2000s Star Wars films, Crystal Skull, certainly Dial of Destiny, these films are covered when it comes to behind the scenes set photography. You have now entered the digital age of set photography as well, where you don't have a budget limitation on the number of photos you're going to take, whereas
yeah,
back in the day every roll of film that cost you film, that cost you processing, that cost you someone to look at contact prints of it and pick which ones you were going to print out, whereas now it's like people just snap away. So it's they're covered in such a way there's not as much to learn anymore. There's not as much mystery, and I guess there's also the computer aspect too. And I know I'm nowhere near answering your question. I hope you don't mind the
no, 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 that's
meandering,
fine. No, no,
but
you're fine. And I will sort of add something to it. I'm not trying to interrupt you or
yeah,
anything,
yeah, no,
but
jump
I
in.
think what would be really cool, I think in about 20, 30 years. So a lot of studios actually hold on to a lot of material, just so that they can make, like for example, Jurassic Park.
Mhm.
They released some new books, which I have here with new photos and everything. But I do think in about 20, 30 years, like talking about Dial of Destiny or Kingdom of Crystal Skull, especially post 2010 movies, the cell phone photos of
Mm.
directors or actors, those personal things and those videos that people make that we don't see. I think
Yeah.
that's what's going to make nostalgia in about 20, 30 years. But go on.
Oh yeah, you could. I mean, oh man, the cell phone, the director's cell phone photo, book, and this could be a digital book too.
Yeah,
Uh, is a brilliant idea. I would. I mean, oh gosh, who wouldn't love to see that? It's almost like when you get somebody auctions off a director's script, and they've got
yeah,
some of their notes in the side, or they've got little doodles. It's like that's amazing. But like to see what they thought, what did Spielberg think? Ooh, I need a picture of that. It's like I want to know what spoke to him. And it's just to understand further what he saw through that lens. And then the next time you go and watch the movie, you see it completely differently. That's amazing.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what 30 years from now looks like on that stuff. I hope we're here to see it.
I hope so
um,
too. I hope
yeah,
so too.
but
Uh,
and now back to your original question about making a product. So generally speaking, we have uh, we have plenty of ideas. I'll try to stick, on the indie side. Star Wars is a much broader universe. There's a lot more to work with. There's a lot more props in the archives and things like that. But at the shop, I'm the owner, but I've got Rob, who's our creative director, works with me on a lot of this stuff. He also does a lot of research with me at Skywalker Ranch at the archives and things like that. And we'll go through our photos and our notes, and we'll be like, okay, what did we see at the archives? What do we know they have that we can draw from? This is on the side of like a prop replica type of thing. Our big thing with the replicas is the archive collection, where we're doing things that are either, sometimes they're cast off an original piece or out of an original mold. Most times they're 3D laser scanned off of the original pieces, resolution scans, digitally output. And then molded and cast for reproduction. The Sometimes things are produced either in metal or whatever. It depends on the item. Um, the I think a good example is the Belloc staff that we released relatively recently. Maybe another one would be even the Thuggy dagger. One of the times we were at the archives, we were looking through the indie shelves, and they had a handful of these Thuggy daggers out, and most of them are like soft rubber. If you know the one I'm talking about, it's kind of the arrowhead looking
Yeah, yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah.
We sold a small run of them. They're all made in the USA. They hand paint them in the studio and everything. And I think there's actually I think it's up for wait list right now. So if anybody does want to grab one, this is the time to get on the wait list. Otherwise, those are going to be done. But that was one of those pieces where I knew the dagger. I had seen one in someone's private collection decades ago. Again, one of the originals from the film, and always thought it was cool. Uh, didn't really internalize how much it's in the movie though until after we saw that in the archives. We did our 3D scan of it, we brought it back, and it was always in the back of our mind like, oh, if we ever have a little lull in the indie stuff, maybe this is a good one to throw in. And when we started looking at the film, to see if we could find some like reference photos, some context stuff to show people where it is. It's all over the movie. Like once they get to Pankot Palace, any of the Thuggee guards have it. There's like the sash, and it just sits in the sash, and they've all got them. And then there's numerous times. There's one where they pull them out on Indy in the tunnel. There's ones where they're coming in with them on the bridge. When they're holding them, it's great though because so many of them were rubber. They have these sort of like two tines that come off the back of the thing. It's like an arrowhead with these two wings. And the guys are just grabbing them by the wings and crunching them down. It's like these are supposed to be like heavy metal daggers, and they're just. Uh, so we based ours on one of the resin models, which was one of the hero ones. I don't think any of them were actually metal for the movie. There were a few that were polyester resin and a bunch that were just soft rubber. And the vast majority were this rubber material. So we did ours in resin. We used polyurethane, so it's got a little more flex. And those are the decisions you have to make. It's like, okay, well, so what are we going to make? Where is it in the movie so that we can see how people are going to maybe react to it, and maybe it's something where we educate people on what it is a little bit more. We have lines like our lines of maquettes, which are based on concept work, which is done before the movie. Sometimes you have to teach people like, hey, this is why our Bib Fortuna looks funny. It's because it was Phil Tippett's first draft. Sometimes we have to introduce them to people. We've gotten to work with, gotten a lot of people from the original crew to work on these editions with us. People like Phil Tippett, Dave Carson, Dennis Murin, John Berg, Chris Wayless, Jeannie Lauren, Judy Elkins, et cetera, Tony McVeigh, where these are people who were household names to me because I was obsessed with the making of the movies, but maybe aren't to everybody else. And I love introducing people to those folks. I love sharing their stories. We've got videos on the at Tom Spina Designs and at Regal Robot YouTube pages, if you don't mind a plug,
Sure.
where there's interviews that I've done with all of these guys, and they're folks that over the years have become friends, and that we can call upon, and this is more of that process. We'll be working on something, and maybe there's a question that comes up. Maybe it's like, oh, there's a crack here on this thing and it's been repaired. Was that this way originally or was it that way? And we'll call up Phil Tippett or somebody and say, like, hey, here's some pictures, here's some vintage photos, some modern photos, which way is right? And they'll, if hopefully they remember and can give us some direction on it. Going back to the dagger, once we've decided we're going to make it, we have to look at it for like, well, what are the challenges of producing this? How and where are we going to do that? Is this going to be a cast thing? Is it going to be, sometimes things are more fabricated. In the if it's going to be cast, what's the material we're going to cast it in? And in the case of the dagger, if it's got those kind of spindly bits, they're maybe a little fragile. Do we want to cast it in a material that has a little bit of flexibility to it so that it's less likely to break in shipping or something like that? The worst thing in the world is to ship somebody something that isn't in one piece when it's supposed to be. So we have to outthink that. How is the packaging going to look? Is there going to be a foam insert or is it going to be packed some other way? In the case of the dagger, how do you display that? Because for me, I would probably put it on a wall, but not everybody does that. So what we tried to come up with is like an artifact stand, like you might have for an old medieval dagger or something like
Yeah,
that. And usually those have bent wire, but we figured a way to do it with two little notches where you could then put this dagger, because it has different access points. You could have it facing up, you could have it facing down, you could have it more, one more horizontal or more upright. And I love giving people choices, so that wound up being a nice straightforward solution. But once you have that, you now got to think, oh, okay, so that's a little welded metal bracket that's totally custom. Where are we getting those made? We're not making 5,000 of them, so we can't get them made overseas. So we've got to find someplace in the U.S. that's willing to do, a few hundred of these little things and powder coat them for us. Where's the wood base going to come from? What's that going to look like? How big does it have to be to support the thing? And then you get into the whole, how do we show this to people? Do we have video content? Is it, how are we doing the photos? What are we doing to show people the scale of it? It's because it's a weapon, technically, you don't want to really show it in someone's hand in any kind of menacing way. But hands are great for showing scale. In the case of the dagger, we actually opted to just put it in photos with our other replicas rather
sure.
than have someone hold it, just because of that, possible concern as well.
Yeah,
We don't want people thinking it's like a cosplay thing or something they should be, fooling around with. It's, purely replica, display only, put it on a shelf. Please don't wave it around at people like, the guys in the movies did.
yeah. No,
Um,
that's pretty neat that you shared that. And it's sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, no, that's fine. That's probably where it ends off. After that, it's just about. The only other thing that comes in, obviously, you've got to set a price, which is, for everything we do, my simplest way to break it down is we make it the lowest possible price we can possibly get away with on it, and then from there, it's how are you releasing it? Are you doing a limited edition where it's a number? Is it a timed edition like we did with these daggers, where you say we'll sell as many as people buy in a week, or is it something different? It's a surprising number of considerations and a lot of time and energy that goes into these things on the back end, and ultimately, even on a small piece, not an inconsiderable amount of what they would call development cost, just in working through all of that and making prototypes and then making molds and seeing how everything is, because sometimes we'll get 90% of the way through a project and have to go back, you know, 5 steps, because at the end of the prototyping process, we realize, oh, that mold's not going to work out. If we're going to try and make a lot of these, we got to do this a different way. And boop, you're back to start. So, yeah, all of those various things go into it. And then ultimately, the best part is when we get to actually share it with folks. When it's, we've had it in the back of our heads for months and months, and people are always asking us, "What's next? What are you going to do next? What's the next indie
Yeah,
prop? What's the next indie prop?" And we're like, "We can't say." So the day when we can say, that's my favorite part of it.
sure. No, that sounds awesome. And And I think one of the things that while you were talking, oh, by the way, the gentleman's name was John Spilleri.
Oh, okay.
He, yeah. But one of the things that I really, while you were talking about this, I remembered back in the day when the internet was new, there was a company, I mean, there still are around, but there was one company that was really popping out and creating like replicas. Was it called Sideshow Toys, I think?
Oh yeah.
Uh, and I remember, I mean, now there's so much stuff, right? Like just even for any movie you can imagine. But I remember at the time there was these two products. Now they go for like six, $7,000 on eBay because they're rare
Yeah.
items. There was a scene from Jurassic Park, the end scene where the two raptors attack the T-Rex.
I
They
know
did
the
a rep
one.
they did a replica of that, and then there was a replica of Russell Crowe, the gladiator, like him kind
Oh,
of leaning down with a sword in the ground, and also a helmet. And I remember at that time I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have like all these cool, you know, movie replicas of Gremlins, the future, but obviously those cost a lot of money now. You can't just,
yeah.
but I know people online who have like, rooms filled with Jurassic Park replicas that they buy from companies in Europe. But it's just so amazing that there's such a strong market for that, and it's still going on. I mean, especially for a film like Indiana Jones, I can see
Right.
Star Wars because they constantly make stuff. But for Indiana Jones, it just boggles my mind that how it's still there, the interest.
It's an underserved market,
Yeah,
and it's something where Disney's most recent push on marketing was obviously based on the new film for most companies.
right.
And when we came into it, we were like, this is a legacy. This is not just a new movie that's coming out and you'll want to make some action figures and put them on a shelf. Like this is something we could do for years and give fans stuff that hasn't really been done in the licensed sphere and certainly hasn't been done with the access that we have, where it's like you'll get companies that put out replicas of things, or obviously there's fan made stuff, but like, you know, to have the access we have to the original props in the archives, to be able to put these things in our hands, to scan them, color match them, photograph the heck out of them, measure every inch of them, you know, to be able to put that into stuff that people can then take into their homes and put, you know, it's like it belongs in your museum. It's like you have to, like, these are artifacts. There's no, every bit from these movies, Star Wars, Indy, whatever, I think of them all as artifacts. I genuinely do. And I collect stuff that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether it's monster masks, whether it's film props or costumes and things like that. And when it comes to a replica, like I want things as close to the original thing that was in the movie as I can get. And to know that what I'm getting has that lineage back to the original, that then it's like that link to the movie. It's that link to the production, that link to being on set. That thing we all wish, if we had a time machine, we would go back in time and like hide off in some corner in Venice and watch Spielberg shoot some of that stuff for Last Crusade.
Yep. No, it's funny you mentioned that because I've actually thought about that the whole time machine thing and just going back and watching the masters directing these
Yeah.
amazing films. Um,
You wouldn't
and
want to get involved because you don't want to accidentally,
obviously,
like, you don't want to
yeah,
butterfly affect the
yeah,
movie somehow. But it's like
change the timeline, right?
I just want to be off to the side. I just want to watch them work. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah. Have you you know this gentleman named David in Winnipeg, Manitoba, who has the Indiana Jones Museum?
Um, I'm
You must
trying to
have.
think offhand, like off the top of my head, I do not, but I would not be surprised if I have actually spoken with him. And is it? I'm trying to think.
It's less David.
I'm sorry.
Less
Oh,
less David.
then yes, I know him through. Oh gosh, I think I've seen him on some of the Facebook groups or something like
Yeah.
that. If it's the fellow I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Um,
I spoke to him almost a year and a half ago, and as of 2021, he had like 9,000 plus items, and
oh
it's
my
considered
God.
to be the
Yeah,
largest Indiana Jones museum. we he actually gave us a tour. It was like a whole tour. It was like 17 minutes over using his phone and just walking around
Right.
like over Zoom.
I
And yeah, I was just wondering if you ever worked with him in terms of getting something that you couldn't find anywhere else because he has some rare
you
stuff.
know, not specifically. I would not be surprised if he's picked up our stuff. I try not to interfere with Katie and Christine and Ross when they're processing orders. I feel like every time I get my, I put my hand in the inbox, I get in their way. I tend to know customers more through their interactions. Like we've got a Facebook group. It's called the Regal Robot Fan and Collector Showcase. Anybody out there wants to join us, feel free. You get like behind the scenes photos of what we're doing and sneak peeks at stuff and some great conversation with really wonderful collectors. But I know of his collection. I would not be surprised if he's got some of our stuff. We haven't done anything custom for him or anything like that, but that it's an unusual thing doing custom work as a licensee. And it's something we have pushed with Disney and Lucasfilm to always be able to offer where possible. Um, so yeah, if there's something that he's never seen done or is too big to do in some kind of like, broader release fashion, drop us a line. We can talk. And if we have talked by email or something, I apologize because I'm just not putting
No,
the
no, no,
name
it's
together.
fine. I was just curious. But it's is there something? I mean, I don't want you to reveal anything, and you definitely won't. It's fine too. But is there something? Two-part question. Is there something that you're working on that will be out in 2025? Is there something that you want to do, but you haven't got around to it for whatever reason? Reality.
Um, so I'll say this. So 2025, we have a few Indiana Jones projects already in the works. Um, there's there have definitely been on the indie side in particular a few things we've wanted to do but couldn't for one reason or another. Those sort of things aren't always final, so I would hesitate to ever name anything like that because there's a lot of times where we revisit things with fresh eyes and maybe you get a different take on it from someone and you get an approval to move forward. Um, there's there's a lot that we want to do. I think I was actually starting to touch on this earlier. Rob
Please
and
go ahead.
I will often bounce around ideas about this stuff, whether it's like, oh, we saw these things at the archives, or like, we'll just watch the movies, not necessarily at work, but we'll come in and be like, oh, I had Temple on in the background the other day, and oh, did you notice? You ever see this, or do you ever watch that? And we've got massive lists of stuff that we want to make from the Star Wars movies, from the indie movies, and it stretches from like whether it's a straight up prop replica or like, oh, it'd be really cool if you did this, but it was a little desk set and it had a place for your pen and things like that. Things like if you look at our like Space Slug desk organizer where you can put the pens in the Space Slug's mouth and it's got the little falcon on the end of it and stuff. Or, where we have skulls of beasts that are from Star Wars. There's a lot of stuff like that where we'll come up with that, like, oh, it's this with a twist, or it's this, but it's got some function to it. Uh,
Yeah.
and the list that we have of stuff that we want to do just for decor or for desk sets or for, furniture even, is massive. The list for
Yeah.
replicas on the Star Wars side, it's like, it would take us a lifetime to make everything that we want to make with Star Wars. We're going to try, but and with indie, it's a pretty sizable list too. Um, we've definitely had a few things where we weren't, maybe not permitted to move forward with them, or that partners felt it wasn't the right thing. Um, but we have, yeah, I would say there's three or four good, kind of replicas that'll probably be out next year. And
Awesome.
we've got one of them that is basically fully prototyped at this point, and we're just figuring out some production on it. We've got another two that are digitally prototyped, but not physically yet. And then a bunch of others that are kind of ideas. We've got another thing that's kind of it may be it'll probably be similar to what we did with the Grail tablet. uh, we put out when we did the Grail tablet, we put that out as wall decor rather than a replica, and it it made sense because of how it just it's so much easier to display on a wall. It's so perfect for that. But it lets us it lets us take a certain approach with it in terms, well, on the licensing side, where it actually gets things out at a better price too. So that was a piece I was really happy to put out. Again, I love Last Crusade, and that to me is like, there's your uh, there's your spark of the film right there. Like his adventure begins by reading that and wiping it off with his champagne. Um, but uh, so we have another piece that's in the works as well for the year that'll at least one wall decor piece that'll be interesting. And I probably shouldn't say much more than
No, that's
that.
fine. You know, it the very first Indiana Jones movie that I saw was Temple of the Doom,
Oh
right?
wow,
And
that's an
so
interesting
okay,
intro.
so I may have seen Raiders when I was really young, but
Uh-huh.
I just vaguely remember the opening, but I'm not
Right.
sure. But Temple of Doom is definitely something I saw when I was probably 14, 15. And the scene that stood out for me the most, and it still does with Temple of Doom, is when they're having dinner. It was completely over the top, but
Oh
you
yeah.
have the monkey brain and the fly. I would love to see a monkey brain cookie jar or something
Oh my God, that would be amazing. Yeah.
that
Yeah, yeah. Just and like
something.
done in a classic cookie jar style, it's all
Yeah,
just ceramic and glaze, not realistic or anything like that. Um, yeah, it's funny. Years ago, I made a replica of the monkey brains for my collection. Oh gosh, this is 30 years ago now.
oh
I used
wow,
to have a lot of stuff that I had made, and then eventually got into collecting the original props. I did eventually have one of the original monkey brains from the film. I had one of the banquet beetles too. That was cool.
that was,
Um,
yeah.
and a friend of mine had the snake surprise, like it's a
When you cut it
fiberglass
open, yeah.
snake, but it's amazing. And yeah, we've got a client through the other company that we do restoration and display for, and we've and some theming, and we've done, oh gosh, dozens and dozens and dozens of projects with this customer. I mean, I can't even. But he's got an insane collection of original Indiana Jones stuff. It's just every time you go over there, it just your mouth hits the floor, and it's honestly, nothing is like going to the archives, but maybe this is close.
That's awesome. No, yeah, it's incredible that the type of work that you guys are doing, and I
Thanks.
honestly, for me, even though I'll be very frank with you, like I definitely haven't bought anything. I probably won't. I
Sorry, I've got
probably
to go. No.
no. I probably won't in 2025. But what it does for me is I mean, I even went on your website. It just like puts a smile on my face,
Uh,
And I think from as a business owner yourself, that should be a very rewarding feeling, right?
Absolutely.
Money is great and everything, and that's what
Yeah.
makes the world go around. But that idea of having a smile on someone's face that, was part of their childhood is beyond anything. So I appreciate
And
that.
we're doing such niche stuff that we know not, there are pieces we do that we're like, oh, this is kind of for everybody thing. And then there's plenty of stuff where we do, we're like, this is for about 100 people in the whole world, if we're lucky. Um, and we know that going in, but I know for myself, I think that probably the closest analog would be like every time I look at a catalog from Prop Store, propstore.com, who does like the original movie prop auctions. Um, it's the same kind of thing. I do collect original movie props, but the budgets that those now have pushed into have kind of pushed a lot of kind of mere mortal collectors out of it. But I always go through the catalogs, and sometimes there's a few things where it's like, oh, I might try and bid on this. But for the most part, it's like, you just love to see it. I love to know that it's still around. I love to know that someone got to see it and handle it and save it from the movie. And now all these years later, somebody's going to maybe give that a home. Like that to me, it's I know the exact feeling you're talking about. If we can give people that feeling, that that little sense of joy just looking at the stuff, that's outstanding. And if I don't need everybody to buy everything we make, but if everybody that gets a little bit of that joy would maybe take a minute and share it with some other folks,
Sure.
that would make me smile, and then I'll have some joy. uh,
Oh, can you hear me?
there you go. Sorry, I lost
Okay.
your audio for a minute there.
Sorry. I just want to wrap up with one little question. You talked just very briefly about that how some items are, you make them limitedly, let's say 100, right?
Yeah.
And based on whatever your research or your, what the demand is, has there been once at least, if more sure, when you made when you targeted 100 limited edition and then the demand went through the roof and you had to change that?
Uh, so So I'll say no. If we set a limit, we do stick to it. It's part of the value of the piece
Amazing.
is in that limit. And we also would never want to have where, people have, we certainly would never change something like that after it's gone on sale. We'd never increase something like that. So if once a piece has gone on sale, you've now had people who buy it with the idea that there's only 100. That to me that's part of the value. So we would never change it there. There are some times where there's room for more than one edition of something. So when we do our maquettes, we usually do two editions. Um, and right now, most of those are we do a signature edition with the artist who sculpted it for the movie. And then we'll do a sketch edition, which we call a legacy edition. And the generally speaking, the sketch edition obviously is more because you've got them doing the basically what the original artist who sculpted the thing for a movie comes back and does 50 or 75 one of a kind hand drawn sketches so that everybody who gets one of these replicas gets a one of a kind sketch to go with it from the guy who made it for the movie or girl. Um, and the so in cases like that, you might have where the sketch edition sells out super fast. We had that with the Rancor sketch edition we did with Phil Tippett, sold out in like minutes, like
Lord.
insanely fast. And it was, I
Yeah.
think it was uh, it might have been 100 pieces in the sketch edition and 150 pieces in the signature. And I think the sketch edition sold out in like 12 minutes or something like that. Um, in hindsight, could you go, oh, wow, we could have made 120 of those and sold 20 more, or 125 of those, or 130. The trick is you never really know. A lot of times when you're talking about really limited edition stuff, most of the ones you sell are going to be in the first 10 minutes. The difference between the first
True.
10 minutes and the first 10 hours is generally minimal. It's so I don't know that I would even call that a judge. I would think the one that there's two that come to mind though. We did a Rees signature edition. This was before we were doing the sketches. It was a maquette by Chris Wayless. That sold out really fast, and we had people asking us over and over and over again, make another edition. Um, we would never do another signature edition, but in that case, we did a numbered edition after it. The original still holds its value. The numbered edition is also very limited. I think it's either 83 or 100 pieces or something like that. And it gives people another chance at it. And like I said, with most of those, we do two editions anyway, so it made sense.
Sure.
Um, One where we don't have that nice out though would be the Nurhachi urn. Those sold out really fast. I forget the time offhand, but it was
That's fine.
really fast. We did 150, if I'm remembering correctly. They were something where it was the first prop replica we did for Indy. We did not have a sense of the number of indie collectors out there really at that point. And we didn't necessarily know how they would react to, let's face it, our stuff isn't like, cut rate, super cheap, made
Right.
made quick and dirty. Our stuff is high end, and in the case of those, they're made by hand. It's also a very unique material that has a level of translucency and color to it that causes a lot of runoff when you're making stuff like that, where you throw away almost as many castings as you keep when you're doing a run like that. So all of this factored in, and we said like, okay, we can comfortably do 150. And in our mind, it was like, oh, we'll see if 150 people buy them. We weren't sure. We thought like, and it's Nurhachi, like that's not the Holy Grail. I mean, when it came time to do the Grail, I think we wound up selling 500 or 499 of them or something like that in a timed edition. But that's the main thing from the movie. That's the MacGuffin. Nurhachi is like, in a quick scene in the beginning of the movie, we loved it, but we love everything. Like,
Of course.
there's nothing in Temple of Doom that I would not love to make. But when that sold, it sold out so fast. And to this day, people are hammering us just, oh, do another edition, do another edition. And that's just not something we're going to do because we have all those 150 people trusted us that it was a rare thing. And if we were to just go back and do another edition now, that would just, kind of ruin that. And we don't want to break that trust.
No, I appreciate you sticking to that sense of loyalty to your customers, also putting value. It's amazing what you're doing again, and I really
Thank you.
want, and I really love the fact that I can tell, and the audience will tell too, you just love what you do.
I'm very
Anything.
I'm very, very fortunate that I wound up where 2-year-old Tom, 50 years ago, wanted to be. Yeah, all these years later to be making props and monsters and putting a smile on people's faces. That's a big win for me.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Tom, for the in-depth
Yeah.
conversation and talking.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
really
amazing.
appreciate you having me on. And anybody wants to check out what we're doing, please visit Regal Robot or Tom Spina Designs. Look us up on YouTube, Facebook, all of that stuff. If you don't mind the plugs, and
No,
uh,
it's all good.
and come see what we do. Maybe it'll make you smile too.
Amazing. And I would love to have you back on whenever you launch the next Indiana Jones.
Cool. Yeah, let's stay in touch via email. We have
Absolutely.
something. We don't have a hard date on it. We have the next thing is lined up. It's like in the chamber and ready to go. And I can't wait to share this one with people. It's very offbeat. It's very us. And I think it'll surprise a lot of people, and I'm excited about it.